Hey everyone, so welcome to today's class. What we're going to be learning are short story elements. In order to understand stories, novels, movies, you have to understand basic elements so that you have a strong core concept, core knowledge. Basically, almost like if you're doing math. When you're doing math, you need to understand basic order of operation in order to do advanced applications. The same thing applies to English. If you're going to understand a particular text that's quite thick, quite deep, you need to understand basic elements. So today's class, what we're going to be learning is short story elements, part 1, plot and setting. So let's do, if you follow my screen, we'll do a little bit of a reading here. Definition of a short story. A short story is a fictional narrative piece of prose that has many of the same characteristics as a novel, but it is usually less than 10,000 words long. Since it is much shorter than a novel, covering a much shorter period of time, a short story is somewhat limited in the effects it can achieve. Without the luxury of the novel's form's fully developed characters and intricate plot complications, the short story writer must introduce and resolve the conflict quickly. Short stories usually emphasize realistic detail, have individualized characters, and carefully develop plots. The short story promises a reading experience that is as equally satisfying as that provided by the novel, but in a fraction of the time. So what does that essentially mean? A short story is short, is less than 10,000 words, and it basically has a conflict and it's resolved very quickly. There are several elements that you should understand: plot, setting, character, conflict, point of view, and theme. We're going to be looking at plot and setting today. So, some of you may be familiar with this diagram, some of you might not be. In order to understand plot, it follows a simple diagram that's almost like a little mountain. It has an introduction, number 1. It has a trigger incident, number 2. 3, 4, 5. It can be a rising action. There may be 6, 7, 8 rising actions. And then eventually it hits what we call a climax, a pinnacle. Then it has a falling action and then a conclusion. So let's go through each of these and understand what each of these elements are, or what these subsets are. The first one is introduction. Introduction establishes the mood, setting, characters, additional background information that we need to know. It enables the reader to understand the basic situation and it arouses their interest. So, it's like those movies like, let's say, Avengers, okay? And the idea is that in this Marvel movie, the superheroes are here, they're introduced, and the sky's brightly lit and it's very beautiful, the world is calm and peaceful. So it sets it up in a mood where everyone is at peace, everyone is doing well, but you're introduced to a few sort of characters that may be involved. It's to allow us to get interested. But what really happens that gets our interest is the second part, trigger incident or inciting incident. That's what sets the plot in motion. Something happens to the main character. Something happens to the main world or whatever it is. That basically there's a conflict that's established. So an alien force crash lands into Earth and they're threatening Earth's paradise or Earth's peace. Rising action. Composed of a series of events and conflicts leading up to the inevitable climax. Involves problems and conflicts. Usually suspense intensifies as the reader waits to see what happens. And so the idea of 3 to 5, the rising action, is that there's a buildup of events that causes a conflict for the character, the main character. There's conflict between other characters and it builds up suspense, right? We're kind of like, oh, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? The pinnacle is the climax. It's the turning point or a main event. It's a major action that is somehow resolved, right? So there's a huge galactic battle between the superheroes and the main villain, and the idea is that there's a big final battle that happens. Following action, events usually shed light on the reasons for or results of the climax. action starts to slow down. So that after the big battle of the superheroes and the villain, the good guys win, let's say, and then the story starts to fall down, falling action. There's less action. You're sort of seeing the battlefield now, and all the smoke has dispersed, and you're seeing these heroes get up, and the idea is that they have saved the day. Conclusion, resolution, usually quickly ties up any loose ends. The situation of the character is never the same as it was at the beginning. The reader is forced to think about the story's message or theme. So the idea is the conclusion, all the superheroes have now saved Earth, they have done well, but what happens, right? The idea is that, maybe the hero has greatly changed, right? Their thoughts about humanity has changed. They still feel uneasy because of some sort of big threat that they're thinking can happen. So the idea is that the conclusion ends and a general plot follows these elements, these categories. Number 1, introduction. Second is trigger incident, a series of rising actions. Then there's a pinnacle climax, falling action, and then a conclusion. There are many types of endings. There's explicit ending, implicit ending, twist ending, unresolved ending, tie-back ending. The explicit ending is everything that wraps up nicely, like the heroes win, the bad guys lose. The implicit ending are when it uses the reader's interpretation. We can interpret the ending of the story in multiple ways. You can disagree with your friends or family about what that ending represented. A twist ending is like when the serial killer in a horror movie comes back and unexpectedly and surprises you, scares you. Unresolved ending, where the reader is left to imagine what happens next. So like the screen cuts to black and then you're not sure if the hero or the protagonist is alive or not alive. Tie-back ending often refers to clues given at the beginning of the story. So all those little snippets in the beginning, it goes back like a flashback and it says like, okay, this happened, that happened, and now you understand the story more because it went back to certain elements in the beginning. You have this particular diagram to understand how a plot is developed. What you're going to do for an activity is that you're going to write point form notes of a particular movie or story that you know. For example, let's say you chose The Three Little Pigs. What is the introduction of The Three Little Pigs? What is the trigger incident of The Three Little Pigs? The rising actions, the climax, the falling action, and the conclusion. You're going to create a document on Google Docs in this sort of format. Just make a table, introduction, and make 2 columns, right? The first column is like introduction, trigger incident, go row by row. And then on the right-hand side, you're essentially going to tell me the description of that particular story that you know. Afterwards, you're also going to you're going to read about setting. Setting is pretty easy. It basically helps establish the time, place, and period in which events of a story occur. So basically, it gives us the general idea of what's happening, like in terms of, is this taking place now? Is this something that's going to be taking place in the future? Is it a sort of a sci-fi element, or is it it gives us a sort of big picture of what's the world going to look like? So you're going to read that on your own though. This is pretty short and pretty simple. But what it does do is that it establishes the mood and our atmosphere. Do we feel sad? Do we feel happy in the beginning of the movie? The idea is that the setting is very crucial to understanding how we are going to start to read it, and it impacts the trigger incidents, right? Anyways, so for your activity, you're going to pick a story, you're going to do this diagram, and you're going to develop that. Okay, good luck. Bye-bye.